Hey everybody, what's up? It's Jay and welcome back. I know it's been a long time since we last made a video, so to make up for that, today we're going to be talking more about some storyline. We're going to be talking about what Chronicles means and how it all links in to the greater zombie storyline. And yeah, so let's just get right into it. So I think the best place to start off is with the multiverse and the whole the whole concept of different universes all linking in, and just explain that a bit and go over it. So the whole thing started out, I'll just quickly recap, how the multiverse all began and stuff like that. So if we travel all the way back to World at War, think about World at War zombies when Group 935 were, using their teleporters to try to figure out how to quickly, transport German soldiers across large distances, to help them in the war and whatnot. So during their teleportation tests, they accidentally figured out that the teleporter could send people back in time instead of just through space. And when they first sent someone back through time, that is when the entire universe became fractured. So if you think about it like this, if you have one universe and then this universe becomes fractured, there's a lot more universes now come into existence. And each of these different universes are more or less the same as the first universe, or the central universe as I used to call it. And yeah, the events are more or less the same, but there are some slight differences between each one. Obviously it would make sense that they are different universes. Now if you can't really understand this, because I do understand this is quite a hard thing to get your head around if you're not really used to all these different kind of multiverse theories and stuff like that. If you think about it as like the human race, if you imagine the human race, there's billions and billions of people, across the planet. But no two people are exactly the same. If you think about genetics and whatnot, everyone is always slightly different. So you can kind of think about the universes like that. There's millions and millions of them, but none of them are exactly the same. They're all slightly different in their own little way. So now that we have our multiverses, or well, not multiverse, we have our universes. There is actually only, I think, about 4 to 5 universes that actually matter, and these 4 to 5 universes are actually the universes that are shown in the Zombies timeline, which we first saw when the director of Zombies, which is obviously Jason Blundell, had a little interview with JC Backfire, and they revealed the timeline, and they showed us quite a lot of stuff. Now, these 4 to 5 universes are the main universe, obviously the central one, the one that got fractured. Obviously, that it goes without saying, that's an important universe. Then you also have the 63rd universe, and the reason why the 63rd universe is important is because that's the universe where Mob of the Dead and Shadows of Evil take place. So obviously that's going to be important, but we'll get more into Mob of the Dead and Shadows of Evil later on. Now the other one is Agartha. Obviously Agartha's the important universe because obviously that's where Dr. Monty wants to make his perfect world. That's where Samantha was trapped inside of in Origins, and there's loads of other reasons why Agartha's important. So those are the most important universes. There's some others as well that were mentioned on the timeline, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. So yeah. Now each of these universes, all the different universes that were created from the fracture of the first universe, they are all linked and intertwined by element 115. Now element 115 is what Dr. Monty describes as being the fabric of space-time, which I think is kind of interesting, because if you think back to the World at War Black Ops days, we learned that element 115 was what caused the entire zombie outbreak in the first place. And in Black Ops 3, we learned that element 115 was actually what the Apothecans used to cause these zombies outbreaks. Because if you think back to the Revelations intro cutscene, you saw, the giant Apothecan creatures firing the 115 rocks through, portals and down onto the Earth to cause undead outbreaks and, give them influence, I guess you could say, give them influence over the Earth. Now, it's interesting because Dr. Monty says that it's also the fabric of space-time, so it's kind of one of those things. It doesn't really make sense, because how can it be the fabric of space-time if it also destroys space-time, if you know what I mean? So, and the reason why I say destroy space-time is because I think it was Zetsubo no Shima, we learned through a cipher the element 115, the reason why the universe actually fractured in the first place was because during one of Group 935's teleporter tests, the level of 115 fell below like the minimum required level that was needed to, you know, withstand the test, I guess you could say. And then obviously it fell below that level, and then the universe fractured. So that is basically the whole concept of the multiverse. Now, I was reading through some forum posts and different comments across YouTube and stuff like that, and I found a really good idea on one of Radostin's videos. There was a comment which said that we should think of it, because obviously Dr. Monty in God's Crovi, he says we should think of the multiverse like a mirror, because if you punch a mirror, then you get all the different shards, and that's all the different shards of glass can be, I guess you could see that as the... or I guess you could reflect it is the best way to say it, as the multiverse, because each of the different shards, they all show a reflection of you, but each one is slightly different. But the comment that I found interesting said that we should actually think of it like a bowl of soup. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because if you think about the one universe, and then you have all the other different spin-off universes, if you imagine them all as in one big bowl of soup, it can kind of help you get your head around how the you know, how they're all intertwined, because, you know, obviously all the different ingredients needed to make a bowl of soup, obviously they're all mixed together and stuff, so it can kind of help you understand how you know, all the different universes are all mixed together and stuff to create the chaos that is COD Zombies. So let's now move on more towards the timeline, and we're going to talk about the different things that are actually shown. Obviously when Jason Blundell had the interview and he showed the Zombies timeline to us. Now, the timeline, it shows, if we look at it briefly, it shows all the different universes, and they're all kind of interconnected like we were talking about. And each of the universes, they're all kind of shown as a spiral. Now, the spiral is actually lots and lots and lots of different tiny pieces of text all made together to kind of show the storyline. Now, the good thing about the timeline, the reason why I think it was a really good idea that they made the timeline, was because it pretty much, obviously, it clears up everything about the storyline, all the things that we were confused about over the years, and all the different things that no one was ever really certain about. It kind of clears all that up, and it makes it much, much easier to kind of get our heads around what is actually happening in Zombies and behind the scenes and whatnot when we play the maps. Now, the other thing I like about the timeline is that it gives our groups of characters names. So if we think about it, before we had the 1.0 characters, we had the 2.0 characters, and we also had the transit crew. Now, the timeline gives us gives each of these groups of characters names. Obviously, we already knew that the 2.0 characters were Primus, but the 1.0 characters are actually called Ultimus, as the transit crew are called Victus. So from now on, I'm probably just going to use those names, Primus, Ultimus, and Victus, instead of obviously transit crew 1.0 characters and whatnot, just 'cause it makes it so much more easier when it comes to referring to these different groups of people. So Victus, I'm going to talk, because Victus are quite an interesting group of characters, because they're only in Black Ops 2. Obviously we don't learn that much about them, and they didn't really seem to be that important when we first, you know, when we first met them, because obviously all they were kind of just pawns being used by Dr. Maxis and Richtofen during Black Ops 2 Zombies, when they both tried to gain control of you know, of the Earth and the zombies after what happened in Moon. So I'm going to talk more about, I'm probably going to make a separate video about Victus, because Victus are further discussed, and we learned so much more about them in the comics, the Zombies comics that were released. I think the actual comic series is done now, I'm not completely sure. But I know several months ago there was a series of comics being released about Victus, and how Richtofen was using, I should say 2.0 Richtofen, or Primus Richtofen, was using them to help him acquire the Chronorium when he went travelling across the multiverse. So yeah, I'm going to further discuss Victus in a later video when we talk about the comics. So if we move on here, we're going to talk about Dr. Monty and the radios, which are found in the Zombies Chronicles maps. Now, the Zombies Chronicles Monty radios pretty much just reiterate the story of the maps that we play in Chronicles. We don't really learn that much from them, unless you didn't play World at War Black Ops and Black Ops 2, yeah, Origins was in Black Ops 2. Unless you didn't play those games, then we didn't really learn that much. Obviously, if you didn't play those games, then you learned about what happened originally in those maps before they were remastered. But I think at least there's most likely more cryptic hints in those radios that are gonna kind of hints towards the future, I guess you could say. Whether it be, obviously, whether Treyarch's next game is going to be Black Ops 4, World at War 2, maybe something completely new, we just don't know yet. But I think there's most likely going to be some cryptic hints in those radios that are going to tell us different things about the storyline that we don't actually know yet. So Dr. Monty, as I said, these radios are all recorded by Dr. Monty. Now, Dr. Monty I find is quite an interesting character because, you know, since Black Ops 3, he's been quite a central character, and he's almost like a godlike figure. If you look at what he's able to do, he's like an all-powerful being. He can make universes, he can destroy universes, and he's quite an interesting character. And there's been some suggestions that Dr. Monty isn't as good as maybe he seems, because if you think about it, you know, the Shadow Man was introduced to us quite early in Shadows of Evil, and it was quite obvious when we met him that he was a bad guy. So then when we were introduced to Dr. Monty, and I think it was Gorod Krovi, obviously we all thought he was the good guy, because naturally there's always a bad guy and a good guy in a story, so if the Shadow Man's the bad guy, then it only makes sense that Monty would be the good guy. But then when we got the Revelations ending, people were a bit like, oh, wait a minute, if this guy is, you know, putting our Primus characters in a time cycle, then perhaps he isn't as good as he seems. Now, Dr. Monty, as I said with the comment that I read on Redustin's video, there was another comment that I thought was quite a good way of looking at it, and that is the whole Negan idea from The Walking Dead. Now, obviously Negan, if you've seen The Walking Dead, you'll know that Negan is a bad guy. He is an antagonist, and he's not a good guy. But if you think about it, he's kind of similar to Dr. Monty, because Negan, he doesn't necessarily want to kill the main characters in The Walking Dead, even though obviously he kills a lot of them, but he doesn't necessarily want to. He kind of just wants to use them to advance his own agenda, and Dr. Monty is kind of the same way. He's not really interested in killing our Primus characters, but he wants to use them to advance his own agenda of having a perfect world for the children, and for there to be no apothecans, and no zombies, and no 115 and all that stuff. So I think Dr. Monty, as I said in Ascent from Darkness, which for those who don't know was my Black Ops 3 zombie storyline video, I think Dr. Monty is neither a good guy nor a bad guy. He's not, how do I say it, he's not on our side as such, but at the same time he's not an enemy. Like, he's just kind of an independent party, and he, as we were talking about, he's using the Primus characters to advance his own agenda, and he's not really interested in harming them, but at the same time he's not really interested in protecting them. They're kind of just there for him to use. So the question, I think the big question with Dr. Monty is Dr. Monty going to be the key to the future? Because I think he most likely is. And whether it be Black Ops 4, World at War 2, we'll just call it Black Ops 4 for now, just to make things easier. But in Black Ops 4, if the storyline continues along the path which I think it's going to continue on, then Dr. Monty is going to be quite a key character again. Like, he's going to be one of those characters that we're going to know about, or we're going to, you know, be constantly reminded of throughout the entire season of the maps, in Black Ops 4 Zombies. So I think it's important to maybe go back, and not necessarily, you know, dig too deep into it, but go back and listen to what Dr. Monty says. Just be really clear about what he thinks, and, you know, what he's trying to do to kind of make it easier for us when it comes to Black Ops 4 Zombies. Just to make it kind of easier for us to know what's going to be happening, and, you know, what's going to be happening to our characters when they're revealed to us. Because obviously there's different theories about which characters are going to be which are going to be played as in Black Ops 4 Zombies. Obviously some people think it's going to be Primus again, other people think we'd have new characters, and it's it's just kind of a one of those things we don't really know about at the moment. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about today, before we wrap the video up, is the potential of or I guess the possibility is the better way to say it, of there being a Mob of the Dead remaster throughout some point before Black Ops 4 is released. And obviously I think it goes without saying, there's no proof of this happening yet. Obviously there's been no confirmation from Treyarch, or in fact there's not even been any kind of like signs or even hints that they're remastering Mob of the Dead. But the reason why people are saying this is because if you think back to the whole cycle idea, how at the end of Revelations, Dr. Monty put our characters into a cycle. Some people thought that if you look back to Mob of the Dead, the characters are also in a cycle. So if you break the cycle at the end of the Mob of the Dead Easter egg, some people are thinking that perhaps that would also break the Revelation cycle, because I think most people naturally assumes that the Mob of the Dead cycle is just kind of like a smaller cycle that was strictly confined to Mob of the Dead amongst the bigger cycle, or within the bigger cycle, I should say. And if we broke the cycle in the Mob of the Dead Easter egg, then if these theories are true, then we would also be breaking the Revelation cycle that our premise characters are stuck in. So the reason why some people were thinking that perhaps Mob of the Dead was going to be remastered at some point was because if we get Mob of the Dead remastered, perhaps at the end of the Easter egg we could actually break the cycle. And if we broke the cycle in Mob of the Dead Remastered, then obviously that would set our story up for a completely new direction for Black Ops 4. Which would kind of make sense, because I know some people aren't really liking the idea of just long-winding the Black Ops 3 storyline into Black Ops 4. So if we got Mob of the Dead Remastered, we could kind of break the cycle and then, you know, set the story off in a fresh new direction. So I think that's pretty much it what I wanted to talk about today. I think we talked about some pretty crazy stuff with all multiverses and time cycles and different timelines and whatnot. So yeah, I think next video we're going to be talking more about World War II, Call of Duty World War II. I'm going to get one of my mates in and we're going to do a dual com. I think that should be in a few days' time. So yeah, thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, peace out.